Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. It is my honor and pleasure to bring to you the co-founder and CEO of Bunch.ai, Miss Darja Gutnick. Welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. Thank you so much for joining me today. It is my special privilege and honor to bring to you this amazing guest, Miss Darja Gutnick. She is the co-founder and CEO of Bunch.ai, which we are going to learn a whole bunch more about. Miss Darja, thank you so much for joining me. I can't tell you how excited I am about this interview.
Hello, and it's a pleasure to be here. Super cool.
Great. Hey, so let's dive right into it because we've got a little bit of a compressed time schedule. I wanted to touch, first of all, tell us about this Bunch.ai. Like this is an app. This is a program that you obviously co-founded, and you're currently CEO of this company. Tell us about the why, the who, like what's the intent?
Yeah. So my co-founder and I got together a few years back, and we identified that we have a similar mission, which is like to help people at work struggle less and collaborate better. And we always felt like this is our kind of 10x impact angle as social scientists. We, thought, if we actually can empower teams to collaborate better, we will help so many problems to be solved in a better way in the world. So we basically started actually the company as a company that was focused on like a B2B business, quite classic, I think. And we were focusing on helping managers and leaders in companies to understand their teams better and kind of like have hacks and libraries of recommendations that were personalized to their teams to help their teams to move along, to help improve effectiveness and so on. And my background is psychology and my co-founder's background is conflict resolution and social science. And so we identified very quickly that while this is obviously a very interesting topic for our companies, unless we as entrepreneurs and as builders and makers actually reach each and every individual at work and make a difference for them, we won't see the impact that we were seeking. And so 2 years ago, we actually turned our strategy entirely upside down and went bottom up and built the AI Leadership Coach, which is what we refer to as the app currently. It's a mobile app, it's an iOS, and Android is coming in 2023, which basically helps particularly new managers, but effectively our user base spans VP and director level, co-founder level users to like people that are not in management positions yet. And it basically helps you deal with very tricky, difficult, challenging situations at work overall and practice social and career skills along the way. So that's, I think, the best way to describe it.
Wow. There is so much to touch on that. This sounds like an amazing tool that is kind of the go-to of you run into this specific situation that most people, unless you've been through it before, you have no idea how to react to that, at least not react appropriately, right? And to have that opportunity to have those tools at your fingertip, right, in your phone. And I love that you're getting onto Android because I think that's an important part of that's amazing. That's really So. What spurred the idea for this? Was this something out of an experience that you or your co-founder had that you're like, man, I really wish I had better access to this type of information? Like what spurred this? Why this app? Why this program?
Yeah, so in my previous phase of my career, I was a leadership coach at a team, particularly a team leadership coach. So I was helping founders to build up leadership teams as they scale their companies. And I noticed that while our programs, which were in sync and in person and kind of group-based programs back then, were really demanded and we had lots of business and we were growing as a consultancy, I always had this feeling that no matter how many days and hours we will book out with these clients, we'll never reach everyone. And also not everyone can afford actually to have in-person consultancy and advisory and so on. So that was what like kind of one pillar of the insight that we gathered in the market back then. The other point was also that the companies I did work with, which a few of them are actually at unicorn status now, always kept kind of giving us that feedback that they would want to have something more closer to them, more personalized, more gamified, kind of more I think it was 2018 at this point. So 2018 adequate, like instead of having some sort of like, in-person, like workshop-y type formats, which we've had now for 60 years and we're kind of over it and we need to innovate on something. So this was in the back of my head. And I think it all started with actually curation of resources. So I started to write a newsletter a while back, way before the product actually existed, where I basically talked to my clients throughout the week and understood their challenges, or at least they were bringing challenges to me and I thought I understood them. Probably half the time I did and half the time I didn't.
Right,
but I was basically digging into like resources I could find online, books, podcasts, anything that I could actually find would be helpful in those situations. And those challenges could be anything. It could be, how do we actually do the next year's yearly planning? Do we need to consider anything special about that? What did we learn? Which new frameworks are out there? Or I have a difficult conversation to have with someone. I need to give them performance feedback, but they're actually really important for the team. However, they need to improve on their individual impact zone. So how do I give that feedback the best way possible? So there were just so many different kind of conversations throughout the work and throughout a normal week that I ended up curating basically solution lists for that. And I think this was the first kind of seed for this idea that the leaders in organizations today and those who are developing and growing to be leaders in their organizations don't necessarily have the time to actually sit down and curate all those lists. So what happens is that they are not really prepared. They go into these situations without structure, without frameworks, without templates. And I think what we've experienced in the past couple of years online is that with the async revolution and more remote work, we actually get used to templates and frameworks. They're okay now. We can use them. It's okay to prepare for a one-on-one and have everything written out. While I think when I started my career, this was still kind of like frowned upon sometimes. Like, you're supposed to know how to do this. You need
like
to be
you're cheating, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so we started to create this library of like these cheat sheets for the new managers that we were working with that definitely felt underprepared, struggled with anxiety constantly, almost on a daily basis. And I think it was just such an overlooked part of the puzzle in the work world overall that we really felt strongly about this opportunity. And then, as I said, we already were building a B2B platform. We basically thought, well, if we actually can pick up these new managers in these growing companies all around the world and we can provide a product for them, we will be having a pathway into businesses back again, because in the end, in our current economy, if you can't really convince the consumer, and we're just humans at work in the end, so we're just as consumers at work as we are outside of work, we won't actually be building like $1 billion business. So I think for us, the pathway was quite clear, and we started building it in 2020 and then launched it in the end of 2020, heavily influenced by the Corona experience, I think, that we all had.
Yeah. Which was almost, I don't know if a blessing in disguise is the right term, but right, because that app kind of matches that current, or what we were all forced into, that kind of culture and circumstance of, having less one-on-one meetings and things of that nature. So that's, man, just the thought as I'm listening to this, the robustness and the Herculean efforts that I would imagine that it took you to create all this and go through it is, I just want to give you the kudos of sticking with it. I'm sure there were challenges umpteen times along the way to have to overcome with that and to make it useful and beneficial to your end users. That's so, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. It's definitely an interesting journey, because I think we learned a lot from similar companies in industries that have gone through that type of transformation. Like if we think in weight loss, for instance, super not related to our conversation right now. However, a few years back, I think it was like all Weight Watchers dominated world, sync meetings. The whole business model was based on accountability for peer partnerships that you meet on a weekly basis. And I think along came Noom, and along with Noom, many other similar approaches and products. And now we have a vast selection as consumers of actual accountability mechanisms we can use async that are much more accessible when it comes to price, and so on and so on. So I think we see a very similar transformation happening in the work area, like how we work and how we learn at work, which is a really fascinating and super interesting time and kind of development and movement to be part of. So definitely super excited still about this opportunity and the building of the product. However, you are absolutely right. And when you look into similar consumerized enterprise or consumer type of products, like it always, I don't know if you're familiar with the term cockroaches, but like it definitely feels like you have these stretches of building and kind of meandering through user feedback for a few weeks and months until you actually see clarity again. So we definitely have been through a few phases where we needed to adjust and adapt, and COVID-19 definitely posed such a chance. But as always, I think these like environmental contextual variables at first look very scary, To give you an example, actually, we started out with mostly audio as our format. So we were thinking that the modern professional goes to work and listens to a 2-minute daily tip about how to improve this or that and their day-to-day as a new manager. And we would be serving this in an app, but the app would be listened to during the commute. And so just like 2 weeks after we had developed all of that, we then learned,
no more commutes.
Cool. Everyone's there. The commute is from the couch to like the bathroom. So we needed to adjust, and we created a what we call read mode, which is a bit of a mix between a book summary, like Blinkist style, like tappable format, and an IG story, so like an Instagram story. So it's very quick, very interactive. We get through it very quickly, and this is our hero format. So like 78% of our users actually use the read mode, like which we didn't really actually like have so much time to design. We kind of like flusteredly like got it together, got it out, and yeah, since then we're iterating on it. But like things happen that are scary at first, but then actually lead to innovation. Right. So in the end, it's all good.
Right. Yeah. And the real key of that, for those of you that are listening to Darja right now, is her ability to pivot. Right? Like you started out with this idea, you're like, this is what the marketplace needs, but then environmental, circumstantial, and your marketplace told you, no, this is really what we need. And even though you weren't planning on it, it sounds like, or even really prepared for it, you made it happen, because it is very obvious that you are passionate about this, not only this concept, and leadership in general and business leadership specifically, but just your program and your piece of that pie to get to the marketplace to improve, the marketplace as a whole. So that, kudos on you. That's pretty impressive that you're able to do that. Because I think a lot of companies and entrepreneurs, because you're an entrepreneur, you're developing this thing, they would have saw that and be like, we didn't plan for this, it's not in our model, and just shut it down, and we're going to go do just something else, right? So that's incredible. I just want to switch gears.
Super. Yeah, go for it.
Well, I just wanted to say, I want to touch on, because there was something that you had, I think I'd seen in one of your previous interviews or what I was reading about you, is this science of leadership. Now, I talk a little bit about, leadership is something that can absolutely be learned. It's an acquired skill. Not, I don't personally believe there's such a thing as a natural leader, right? I think that's something that we just learn over time. Talk to me about your interpretation of that and what you mean by the science of leadership.
It's an interesting term because I think it has many colors to it. So I'm going to take like 2 or 3 out of the like Bunch playbook of the Bunch universe, how we use science in order to develop leadership as a concept or even as a mindset in that sense in our users. So we work with a few scientists, and my previous career was in academia, actually. So I was part of a PhD program in the Netherlands, and there I studied creativity and leadership as like at the intersection. So basically I was trying to understand how does leadership or do leadership behaviors actually act as a resource or as a demand on someone who's trying to be creative. So I think we use to a degree like 3 different frameworks that we consider scientific. So one is a partner of ours who works at Stanford GSB, Charles O'Reilly, has developed a framework that helps you measure cultural norms in a team, in an organization, or a department. And okay. we have worked with him and further developed it into a framework that helps you understand how you actually work with others and what your work style is. So we basically took like a cultural norms framework and adopted it to the individual. And what that helps us do is when you actually start learning with Bunch, so when you onboard the app for the first time, we create a personalized profile of what we call your work and leadership style, which basically is based on 6 different dimensions that are based on O'Reilly's work. And it helps us really understand what your priorities are, because in the end, we're all slightly different, right? Like we all somewhat care about customers, we all somewhat care about our colleagues, we all somewhat care about innovation and so on and so on. But like how much we care about these different things really impacts how we act with others, how we behave at work. And that drives a particular set of challenges, conflicts, etc. And at the same time, it also makes us strong in a specific way. So that's how we are like all kind of different and unique and individual, but at the same time, we also have specific parallels and similarities, right? So not unsimilar to a personality test, but it's different because a working style and a leadership style changes over time. So as you adopt new frameworks, new mindsets, as you go through new situations and you learn for that, you also understand maybe, so to give you an example, I was the maker, so I was adaptable and collaborative in the past. And as the company grew and we went through different challenges, I needed to find ways how to find focus zones, and leading a team can be very tricky when you're also still creating yourself. So I started to become more of a maverick, which basically means I started to be less collaborative and more independent because I had to. And so this is, I think, one example of how science can be applied in practice. And we actually see a lot of adoption with this particular feature set in the app. Like, people love learning about themselves. They love understanding better. Why do I respond this way? Why do I react that way? How can I respond differently? What consequences would it have? And so I think this idea of measuring ourselves, not so much to compare ourselves with others and to find out, am I better or worse? Not at all of that, but to really have qualitative tags, basically, and names for things that are driving my behavior, I think is something that has been really, really beneficial and valuable coming out of science. And another, I think, application field that we also see a lot is when we look into group dynamics. So when we, our library of roughly 300 frameworks that is based on scientific experts, but also experts in the field, so like operators, managers, executives, oftentimes had scientific frameworks in it, actually, because a lot of the behavioral science and psychological, like org psych models, find their way finally into like recommendations for managers. So a few of the frameworks that we have are actually based in real naked psych science that has been found out in experiments in labs at universities, and then proven kind of like working and vetted and valuable in organizations. So these are the two ways, I think, how science and Bunch interact.
That is impressive, because as you're going through that, I'm sitting there, just thinking through my own past journeys and how beneficial that would have been as a younger leader throughout my career, to be able to just even acknowledge and identify, like, oh yeah, like, I hate doing this parts of it, but it still needs to be done, when leading teams, and how that changes. You can't lead a team of 5 people the same as you lead a team of 50, right? It doesn't work. They're a completely different set of skills and processes and behaviors and thought patterns you have to have and implement to be able to do that and transform into that new type of leader. For lack of that better term.
It's really interesting because most people are actually really interested in scientifically grounded like advice and recommendations. And one of like the motivational layers that I personally have as a psychologist coming out of like this org psych field, I always felt when I studied that it's so interesting, and I always brought it back to like into my family. My mom is an entrepreneur, is running a real estate and a restaurant business, and I was always trying to translate all these like frameworks I was learning in the uni to her and saying like, let's try this, let's try that. And she was extremely overwhelmed by all of that, but also kind of grateful. And I think my overall takeaway from that time, when I started to work with also big corporates like BMW and others, the amount of like dilution that happens when a scientific research result is actually finding its way into practice and application is incredible. We like lose all of the insight. And one of the, I think, motivational like points for me back then when I started newsletter also was to actually go for more of those papers that like the normal person at work doesn't actually have access to or wants to read, understands, and kind of decode and translate it. So I think scientifically based like thinking in organizations was always kind of something that I was very passionate about, but I also was surprised to see that most managers nowadays want to have more scientifically founded frameworks and advice, but it's still very difficult to actually translate it into like actionable bits and pieces.
Right. Yeah, beyond just the time factor, one, knowing where to find it, and the time factor to find it and what's applicable to you at that stage. Because you're right, whether you're, you had mentioned BMW corporate, whether you're in a traditional corporate office type setting, or you own your own plumbing firm and you've got like 10 plumbers that work for you, like, you need these skills, and we all want to be better at what we do, but it becomes a matter of accessibility of the information and the appropriate information. Because you're right, there's a far cry distance between, when, in whether it be an academia sense or a research type of a sense where they're coming up and they're maybe doing their interviews, but then getting it into where it's actually applicable and helpful to the end user.
And that is exactly what Bunch in the end delivers to its users. I heavily recommend checking it out. We had the most moving emails from someone who's been promoted to a gas station supervisor role, who is not in tech, does not have a university degree and had to supervise like 8 people in a highly hectic environment, and is using the app and wrote us an amazing letter after saying like, you guys, like I would never have even have thought to go to management school. Like, what is it even is that? And we have, of course, a big chunk of our users is in tech, in kind of like the more newer type of industries. But I think it really applies to so many different contexts and industries and backgrounds. I heavily recommend checking it out. There is a free version of the app. It does allow for like lots of exploration. We are also working on the premium plan currently, and we'll be releasing that, which will be even more personalized and even more like full of actual like personalized support and growth, and kind of helping you to build up those skills and make it really count for promotions and career development and things like that. But the free app is extremely helpful for anyone who has to interact with humans at work and knows the trigger situations that we all go through on a daily basis.
Yes, yes. And there will be a link to that in the description of wherever you're listening or watching. So make sure you download that free version of the app and check that out. And I do want to mention and just acknowledge, like, from that letter you had mentioned you're getting from this gas station manager, right? You not only changed that person's life, which is amazing, but think of just the spider web effect of that. You improved, like you said, 8 people that now don't have to work for a tyrant. They now get to work for somebody that actually is interested in them, and they understand how to lead teams and things. Like, it's amazing. So, man, congratulations. That's awesome.
I mean,
that just gave me that tingly too. Yeah.
Yeah, I did definitely cheer up when I was reading it and shared it with the team. But I think in the end, it's also that person's will to learn, that person's will to overcome your ego, wanting more and thinking like, I'm good enough. I was just promoted. And we all know these situations. I think yesterday I had a conversation with one of team members, and he quoted a really interesting sentence saying like, if you think you are something, you kind of stop becoming something. And I think that's exactly the spirit that we want to instill in people, but it also requires that you have a growth mindset and that you are interested in learning and changing yourself. And I think the kudos that I'm gladly going to take and carry further to our team, of course, go to our users and every one of you out there that is listening to this podcast or downloading Bunch or reading books on the topic. Like, it only lives because you all are thinking that you still need to learn and you still need to grow. And I think because of that, this magic can happen. So happy to be, of course, part of the puzzle and the ecosystem. But I think the kudos goes to everyone out there that is working tirelessly, like on a daily basis, to improve themselves.
Yeah. Now, most of my podcast episodes are very tactical in nature. I try to, give practical advice for, new business owners, new leaders, seasoned leaders, the whole gambit. So you talked about, kind of a first-time leader and their fast track to success. Beyond that initial, because you'd mentioned people really enjoy learning the psychology behind it. Why am I the way I am? When I'm interacting with people. What is another practical tip for a new leader out there, whether it be, like I said, at a gas station or in a corporate type setting, they just, got made head of their department or their small team. What is another tip that you might have based on your experience for that fast track to success to be a better leader, to make the maximum use of that?
Actually, I have 2, and I think there is like a unlimited amounts of them, right? So those 2 are just very relevant for me right now. So hopefully they will be helpful to some of you out there as well. On the one hand, I really believe in plans and like the ability to prepare yourself for a situation. So I'm a big like preparation person. However, I think my biggest learning is the best way to approach any day or any week at work is to be as prepared as possible and have a plan, but be ready to throw it out of the window the moment you hit the ground. In the first Zoom call, it may be flying out of the window and you cannot feel bad about it. So like, make the plan, but at the same time, live in the possibility that it will be obsolete like in 5 minutes from now, which is a bit of a weird state of things or like state of mind to like nurture in yourself. But when you do that, you get into this opportunity mindset where instead of getting caught up in defensive mode because things change and you don't know how to respond to them because you're so in love with your plan, you actually you immediately look for opportunities. Oh, that means we're not doing this, so that frees up time for this other priority. Is that important now? Are we doing this now? Yay, exciting. So I think the mistake I made in the beginning of my career was to overplan. Then I learned, none of this pans out the way I want to. So let's not plan.
Yeah.
Then I didn't plan for a while. That was extremely hectic because, especially as a leader, people want you to be transparent. They need to understand your thinking, especially if you move fast. You need to communicate more. And so if you didn't pre-write anything down, like the bullet points for your day and week, you have to come up with everything on the fly. And that's really tiring. So I'm like, oh, I'm making plans so I can show people what I thought originally, but I probably will learn new information in 5 minutes from now. And that's okay. So that's one.
Yeah.
The other one is, I think, and this is a personal one, and I don't really know whether that's the best advice or like whether that counts for everyone. I know that different people are motivated by different things, but for me personally, I think my mission is to help people grow. I really deeply feel a satisfaction when I intersected with someone, even if it's just for one day or one conversation, and they took something away that they can then apply, and they kind of, leveled up that like potential they have, or like came 1% closer to that. I think that's really something that moves me forward a lot. And I think if you cultivate that mindset in yourself, that you actually, we are building a business and we want to make a difference for our users. We want to create returns for our shareholders. That's all good. Like, However, I'm also really just like motivated by helping my team grow. And so I always feel that you can get through any difficult situation if people are not only loyal to the mission, but they're also loyal to you as a person. And I think you can achieve it if you actually are loyal to them as people and respect them as individuals, are curious about them, and really make this like contract with yourself and them. We are doing this together. Like, you may not be here in a year or 2 years or 3 years. And that's okay, because we have a relationship. Like, I'm interested in your growth. You're interested in my company's success. We are helping each other out here. That's amazing, as long as it works. When it doesn't work, this stays, and like, we meet each other again in like 2 levels from now, or like 2 rounds from now. So like, that's, I think, another thing that I try to like constantly reinforce in myself, and prevent like defensiveness when, people move on, they have new opportunities, or some other things happen. I think this really has helped me along as a leader.
Right. And I would say, and I just want to touch on 2 things. Yes, the plan and prepare, and just the ability to flex, because same thing, man. I've like spent all day, all week planning for this thing, and then whoop, just right out the window and not. I loved your term about being defensive about it. Like, oh, I've got to protect my plan, and all that kind of stuff. And then the other aspect of the external aspect of creating those connections with people and ensuring, because that's what business is. It's a team effort, right? No successful business or company in the history of the world was done by one person. And when you don't have those connections and you don't take time as the leader to create and nurture and foster those connections, man, you're setting yourself up to put yourself on an island and just inevitable failure in one form or another. So that's awesome. How, I don't know people, and we've talked about, and there will definitely be a link to your Bunch.ai, but how else do people get into your world? They want to learn more about what you've got going on. They want to keep track of the amazing things your company is doing. What's the best way for people to reach out and get into your world?
So I am typically like the platforms of my choice are LinkedIn and Twitter. So you can find me under my name, Darja Gutnick. It's spelled with a J because, long story, German spelling and things like that. But you can definitely find me on LinkedIn and Twitter with both of those. And I'd love to hear from you. I've been a bit quieter, I think, lately with everything else that's going on in the world. And we've been heads down building and things like that. But I always love connecting with fellow happen. So really happy to be in touch with anyone who reaches out. Twitter and LinkedIn works.
Perfect. And I will have links to your accounts in the description of these. Now, I ask all my guests because I just think it's so fascinating, just based on their various experiences. What is your interpretation in a business sense between the difference between a manager and a leader? Can you give us your kind of 2 cents on that?
Absolutely. I'm going to quote Bunch's definition of leadership, which is to impact yourself and others in a positive way, which means you do not need a team in order to be a leader. You can lead in specific situations. You don't have to lead in all of them. Lots of managers don't lead in any of them. So I think leadership is about the positive impact, and it requires intentional effort in every single situation and instance. Very tiring, but also very rewarding. In management, I think, is a very operational type of term, I would say. It's, I think, someone who has formal authority in an organizational group of people any kind that is responsible for structuring work. Right. One way or another. This can be shift planning till like actual software development processes and things like that.
Right. I think that is a key term that actually I don't recall that any of my guests had mentioned about that formal authority piece, because managers, you have to have that formal authority. That's what makes you the manager. But a leader, man, that could be the 16-year-old kid that just came onto your team that's just really trying to get after it and, encourage and push other people to greatness, including themselves. So I love that you included that piece of that. That is amazing. Well, Darja, what else have you got going on? I know you said you've got a bunch of things happening besides your Bunch.ai tech and your advancement of that. Is there any other projects you got on the plate that maybe you want to drop a hint to?
Yeah, definitely. I'm writing the weekly briefing, which is basically a once-a-week newsletter for anyone at work, really. Definitely for managers, but anyone really that wants to be a leader, so wants to help their teams along. And I'm I write it myself, so all the examples are authentic, things I'm going through as a founder, many weird and funny situations in there. I'm also hosting a podcast. It's called Teams at Work by Bunch, and I am interviewing interesting guests there, most of the time managers from companies like Apple and Calm and Headspace and other things. So really interesting conversations, just as this one, hopefully, if you enjoyed it, about the failures and ruminations of those leaders. So that's mainly, I think, my two pet projects. But other than that, I think Bunch has a lot in store for 2023 with the premium plan coming out, but also many additional add-ons that we're going to be developing for the ecosystem of our users. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I will have links to your podcast and your weekly briefing newsletter in the description as well. So everyone can make sure and subscribe to that and check out, because I think we can all agree that getting a chance to go more in depth on a lot of these topics in an expanded podcast format, and certainly a newsletter format, would be hugely beneficial. So that's awesome. Congratulations on that. Well, Darja, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Your willingness to donate your time to my audience and give us those kind of tips and introduce us to your world is hugely fascinating. I know I've benefited from it. And I know my audience will absolutely enjoy this and benefit from it as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a super cool pleasure to be here. And looking forward to hearing from all of you. Please don't hold back with any questions or comments. Would really love to connect. And thanks for this conversation and the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, this has been the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My amazing guest, the co-founder and CEO of Bunch.ai, Ms. Darja Gutnick. I appreciate you. No matter where you're at in the world, have a fantastic afternoon. Bye.